Thanks, Chairman, and can I first of all congratulate Ms Doherty and wish you well in your role, and I would concur with a lot of what you said. That RTE does an awful lot of very positive things in terms of public service broadcasting, and I think that's important. Can I just ask in relation to something I suppose that's in the public arena recently, and it's this concept of accountability. And here in the Oireachtas we have to be accountable for, and rightly so, for the public's money in terms of our salaries and in terms of our expenses and in terms of everything. But yet RTE seem to work in an environment where it's okay to take somebody on and say we'll give details of their salary in 3 years' time. And I'm just wondering, in the current climate, that Ireland has found itself in, do you think that's acceptable? And as chairperson of the board, are you going to do anything to redress it? Because I know that, maybe I'm wrong now, but some of the media commentary recently of one particular individual, who I think, paraphrasing him, said he would leave the country if Enda Kenny ever became Taoiseach. He's due back on the airways in RTE soon, but yet his salary won't be disclosed for 3 years. And I'm just wondering, in your role as chairperson, is that something that you're comfortable with? Just in relation to, the previous speakers mentioned the independence of the broadcaster, free of commercial interest. Are you satisfied that that is the case? For instance, if a bank was to sponsor a current affairs programme, do you think that that there's independence or could there be a suggestion of a lack of independence in that kind of a sphere where a programme is being produced and is being sponsored by somebody who might be perceived to have a vested interest? And given that you receive over 80% of the licence fee at the moment, I think it accounts for over 170 million. Is there a need for commercial enterprises to be sponsoring current affairs programme where opinion is being formulated? Just in relation to current affairs, and I know Deputy Minahan alluded to it in relation to serious gaffes that took place in RTE, particularly in the run-up to the presidential election. How satisfied are you that that has been fixed? Because I just, recently have been, I suppose, listening probably more attentively to current affairs programmes, particularly at the weekend. And balance is something that I am always conscious of. And I'm just wondering, in your role as chairperson, would you find 2 opposition spokespersons and 1 government spokesperson on a major primetime Saturday afternoon current affairs programme as being balanced? Or would you find 2 government and 1 opposition balanced? Because I think there's a tendency, certainly in the recent past, that balance has been thrown out the window, and I'm just wondering how you feel that would marry with the concept of being a public service broadcaster in drawing down 80% of the licence fee. Just in relation as well then to, I think it's important that when something isn't broken, don't fix it. And I asked the Director General at one stage in relation to the old concept of questions and answers, for instance, in relation to current affairs programming. That hasn't been, since John Bowman left RTE, there hasn't been a questions and answers type programme. He was one person who was definitely able to weed out, as I said, the plants in the audience in terms of political planting. And every time, whether it was Frontline or Primetime Investigates or Primetime There's an Audience or whatever it's called now, I said it here before, and I stand over it, that sometimes you turn on the television and there's as many plants as you'd see inside in a garden centre in these audiences, and they're anything but fair and anything but balanced, be it to government or opposition. And I just wonder why the old format of questions and answers had to be done away with and couldn't be brought back. And similarly, if it's not broken, don't fix it. A lot of our constituents will have been saying to us, what happened, winning streak? And why has that been ditched? And I think that, your viewership in that programme halved in 1 week. It went from a little over 400,000 down to 200,000 in 1 week. And again, in terms of the licence fee and in terms of public service broadcasting, how do you react to that collapse in viewership in the space of 7 days? And just one final thing, Chairman. 2FM. are in competition with the commercial radio stations across the country primarily. And we've seen the JNLR figures here time and again, and they're certainly struggling. Is there a plan to do anything differently there, or is it going to continue on as is? Because certainly, again, in relation to the TV licence, with 80% of it going into a kind of a protected environment, it's also able to advertise commercially. Local radio stations feel that they're in competition with this station that's protected and insulated, and nothing seems to be happening. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Chairman. Deputy, there's a long list there. So.
There is a long list, Deputy O'Donovan, thank you. To my knowledge, and I stand corrected on this one, I do not believe that RTE supports the sponsorship of current affairs programming. I don't think it's something that they do or have done.
I checked the main drive time radio programme and asked who is it sponsored by.
I think it is.
Yes, but it could be termed a features programme as opposed to pure current affairs. It does deal with some news issues. With regard to accountability, I certainly, as a board, we would want to ensure absolute independence. And as I said earlier in my address, our first and foremost responsibility is to the audience. And it is very difficult as a former producer or as an editor of any programming to pick out individual programs and to decide why RTE as an editor would have dropped them or not. I think there has to be an element of risk, calculated risk, when you're making programming in television. And retaining formats that work, it's RTE and the editorial staff's right to change. There are arguments about keeping what works and changing. So I think that certainly if something is failing desperately, the RTE management will look very closely at it, and the board and I as chair would be asking questions as to why that is happening. You mentioned questions and answers and winning streak. I know every time RTE changes something or when they close something, there is an outcry because sometimes the audience doesn't like change. They like the familiarity. And I think that probably shows the relationship that RTE has with its audience nationally, is that familiarity of being the heritage broadcaster. I would like to think that we have strong current affairs editors in place where balance is hugely important, and that when you listen to one programme across 2 hours, I think the view has to be taken across 24 hours or across a week. But certainly as a board, and we will be well equipped with the new members on board to ensure that we ask the right questions of the management in RTE.
About in relation to salaries, the question that I asked about people's salaries not being disclosed for 3 years.
Well, I think
if that was Irish Water, for instance, RTE would be running prime time specials from now till Kingdom Come to get the salaries out of them. But yet there seems to be no difficulty in not releasing someone's salary for 3 years within the state broadcaster. Well, surely in terms of accountability that's not acceptable.
Well, I have asked the management in RTE about the salary of a recent individual who has moved to join RTE. I have been assured that the sponsorship that has been received for the programme that Radar C will be presenting starting next week more than covers the salary.
But Chairman, I think this is important. That's not the question that I asked Ms. Doherty. I'm just asking, as chairperson of the board, do you feel that it's acceptable in 2015, given the backdrop to this country, that somebody's salary in the public sector will not be revealed for 3 years?
I think that, firstly, in the top 10 salaries, presenter salaries, firstly, in Ireland, at the moment, I'm told 50% of those are RTE, and the other 50% are actually the independent sector. It can be commercially sensitive information, but certainly, Deputy Donovan, I will go to the board and I will get the board's view on that, and we will talk to management about that. At the moment, the agreement is 2 years in arrears.
Yeah, I don't think that would be acceptable anywhere else in the public sector.
To sum up, can I just make a point first?
He's really only designated at this stage, and I think we're asking for questions.
Yeah, yes, fair enough.
Yeah, okay. absolutely. I think the question that's been asked, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is that can RTE demand the, if you like, transparency and public accountability for others that they don't give themselves? And I suppose that's the question, and I'm sure that's the one that...
How credible is it that RTE will be examining other elements of the public sector when the same principles don't apply to itself?
Yeah, well, I mean, the question has been posed today, and obviously Ms Doherty hasn't taken over yet, so that's a question that will be hanging out there until you've asked the question and it's here being asked in public, and I think that it will be, it needs to be answered somewhere along the line, if not today.